Okay, Sohrab, what made you pick fire staff over the other staffs? Hello?
I wanna set the universe on fire, feel it burn tonight. Set the universe on fire, there's no end in sight. Bring me to the holy raging power, where I find my destiny. The universe on fire, you're my guiding light. Oh my god, motherfucker! Boom, bitch! Get fucked! Get fucked! I wanna set the universe on fire, feel it burn tonight. Set the universe on fire, there's no end in sight. Bring me to the holy raging power, where I find my destiny. The universe on fire, you're my guiding light.
All right, Sohrab, what made you pick the fire staff over the other staffs?
Oh, I chose a fire staff. Why did I choose a fire staff? You know, it's actually funny when I really start thinking about why I chose a fire staff. I can't remember why. But I know I was with the frost staff originally, and I was a frost staff all through beta 3, and then they really nerfed the frost staff to garbage compared to like the other stuff, and they buffed the fire staff. They buffed the fire staff, so I decided to give it a try and started out with the one-hand fire staff, and then eventually transitioned into the infernal staff that you see today on a lot of the GVGs.
So you just wanted it because it got buffed and then it had more kill potential than the frost did?
Yeah, I was kind of like I was trying to really get into the GVG scene, so when I was trying to do that, it was really you had to go shift with the meta. And so when I was playing a lot at first, everything was frost, and it just happened to be that like that was the class I first started playing the game with was frost. And then when I started getting more serious with the GVGs, everybody was talking about how good the fire staff was, so I tried it out, and when I tried it out, I just fell in love with it and never let it go.
Speaking of GVGs, because you're pretty much one of the top fire staff in GVGs, and like you pretty much are a full-time GVGer. What is
Thanks, bud.
Oh, nah. Oh, I gotta cut that out. Okay, so but you playing GVGs a lot and everything like that. Was there a particular fire staff that was better in GVG that isn't now, or has it always been the infernal staff?
The one-hand fire used to be the #1 fire staff to go to, and it was really cool because with the one-hand fire, you could change the offhand to whatever you desired. So you could go like a tome of spells, which increases your cast speed and gives you more mana. So you could do something more maneuverable with chaining your helm to like a Druid Cal, which is more of a support helm for your team that drops a pool of mana under you for mana regeneration for your team. Or you could go like a taproot, which increases your HP but decreases the amount of HP or healing that you get. So for example, it would be like minus 10% healing, but you get plus like 400 HP. So which gives you the potential to sit there and do more damage and put more damage output because your HP is higher, so they can't burst you down. Because as a clothy, the biggest thing is like in GVG fights is the clothies are the kill potential, because the cloth armor class has the lowest amount of armor compared to anything else, like the leather and armor or leather and plate. So my theory behind it was like, if I can increase my HP, I can do more damage at the time, and if I choose my targets properly, we can win the fight in a better scenario. So when they ended up nerfing the damage of the one-hand fire staff like by 10% on the Q, which on the base damage, how it scales when you're wearing the Druid robe, each stack increases your damage percentage. So like having a 10% damage nerf on your Q is actually a lot bigger than it looks just off numbers alone. when you see a patch coming in like that. So when that happened, the potential to use Frost became viable again, and then eventually it was seen that the Infernal Staff E it started getting buffs in the patches. Like it was like increasing the Contagious Fire, which is the E ability on the Infernal Staff, was increased by like 8%, then it was increased by another X percentage, and eventually got to the point where if you were able to put the Infernal E with stacks of your Druid Robe on the Contagious Fire of it was able to touch a cloth user, it would really do a lot of damage. So stacked on top of when you're queuing, you put burn ticks on a target, fire ticks, which every second takes a percentage of damage, like a certain damage number off of an opponent. Combined with E, you can just do a lot of damage across a board, across the enemy.
Yeah, the Infernal Staff just applies so much pressure when I watch it in GVGs and stuff like that. Like it's nuts. You put it on somebody, and like if you put it on like any like tank or the healer or something like that, whoever you put it on, like they have to get away from the party, which separates them, which allows you to get more kill potentials. Not necessarily on them maybe, but on somebody else because they're separated from the party.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's just so much different kind of plays you could do with it. Like you could send the Infernal E early on the tank, which forces him to have to use multiple resistance or multiple defensives. So like he'd have to use his resistance pot early, or he'd have to drop Adjudicator armor early, something to increase his sustainability in the backline. Because if the enemy doesn't have something like an Infernal in the backline, unless they have something like equivalent damage to do that quickly, would be like an Arcane that would frazzle and poison pot the tank, then you have to fall back or again use those defensives. But the benefit of the fire is, like you said, that they have to zone themselves or they have to spread the damage back to their team. And if currently the meta with being the Fallen Staff, which is like a pool heal, if you drop that on a tank or anybody really, and that spreads, you're going to be doing damage to them after they're fully healed anyway. So you just can apply so much pressure. And kind of what I mentioned earlier, like if you drop it early on the tank, now theoretically your Qs are doing the damage of the E on top of every Q. So say the E every tick is like 60 damage, and then your Q is like 150 damage. So normally it would be 150 damage, but now you're doing 210 per second. So you're just taking the time limit of that tank away from them, which just gives you so much more control in the fight. And then also your W on the fire compared to any other. There's no other range class that has the stronger W than the fire. Like the firewall itself, you can just completely zone people. I mean, of course, there's counters to it, like the Night Helm, which moves people past the crowd control ability, crowd control stuff, so they can walk through a firewall. But that also takes a skill away from the enemy. Like they have to put a Night Helm on to be able to counter the firewall, which just gives you more control of the fight.
Exactly, and we were talking about that earlier, how like even though fire is like a pure damage class, and like they just pump out disgusting amount of damage, it's also weird because it also has that support utility that protects the back line and protects the healer. Like if a tank is jumping in, like, or even like a bear paw or something, like you were saying, like you can throw the firewall down and it stops him from doing that. Like it's crazy how it's a support but a high damage class. That's what I think is crazy about fire.
Yeah, so I was a major Great Frost player at first, and like the Great Frost, the Curse, and the Fire all have a W that can control a fight. So the Curse has a Desecrate, which roots in place, so that can still stop a Bear Paws or Dual Swords jumping in the air. But it's and it can stop things through Night Helm. So, but it's a lot more skill shotty, and it doesn't stay there in place. Like the Firewall has like a time period where it stays up. The Great Frost also has the W, the Frost Nova, which freezes anything that comes through under your belt. So it's really strong because Night Helm can't stop that either. But the fire is just so, and the cooldown's good on all of those. All three of those classes have good cooldowns on the W, but the fire one just has a little bit more punch in the Q than the other ones, and it's a quick punch compared to the Curse, which is dots being built, so it's damage over time, and the Frost, which is more of the fires, like you said, it's a good support while still doing damage, but the main difference between the Frost and the Fire is the Frost Qs are slowing, and the Frost and the Fire's Qs put a fire tick on the target, so you're doing more damage compared to the Frost, where you're controlling more of the fight. with that as well.
Exactly. And with somebody like you who has 400 fire, and like I do a lot of random dungeons with a guy named Young G. He also has 400 fire, and like y'all's Q just does so much damage. It just eats away people. Like just a Q alone. I feel like the fire Q is one of the highest damaging just regular Q spells that like in like the actual game.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. And it used to be stronger before. So I mentioned this earlier, like the fire ticks. Like, so whenever you put a Q on a target, it puts a fire tick on them. And then when you're done queuing a target, a second after your last queue, a fire tick occurs, and it does like an X amount of damage depending on how many fire ticks you have on the target. But before they patched this, whenever you queue a target, as soon as the queue would hit, the fire tick would also hit as well. So it would not only put a bleed on them, essentially a fire bleed on them, it would also do an immediate bleed damage. So say the bleed was like 20 damage on the first tick, and so you do 120 damage fire Q and then a 20 tick. Then your next Q is another 120 damage, but now you have 2 fire bleeds on them, so it would be 40 damage. So your next Q damage total instantaneously would be like 160 damage. So by the time you get to 5 ticks, say that instant Q would be like 90 damage or something. So now you went from doing something that originally scaled at 120 damage, now up to 210, just based off Qs alone. And that doesn't even include when you pop your Druid Robe and you're building your obsessive stacks, and your damage is increasing each one. So the fire used to be a lot stronger, and people really and it deserved the patch that it got.
Right.
It's pretty broken.
well, speaking of this, since you're talking about gear, let's go and talk about gear real fast. So what's your favorite gear to use for a fire setup in a GVG? And I know you do your passives a little bit different, so you can explain to why you use the passives that you do. And also you use blink in a very interesting way. So you can explain why you're using your blink and set up with your obsessive burst and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So so my personality is kind of like an addictive personality. Like when I find something that I enjoy, I really like to just invest all my time into it, and I like to learn everything about it as I can. So with the fire, there's a lot of like I guess like creativity you can kind of do with the class. So I'll start with just like breaking down my build first, and then explaining why it can be used in certain ways. So for the helm, I use the Royal Cowl, which and on the ability I use the I use the Perpetual Energy, which basically gives you infinite energy for 15 seconds, and it's got a 30-second cooldown. So essentially, the cooldown's 15 seconds because when it's casted, you'll have it going for 15 seconds. Now, mind you, unless you get purged, because the fire class is a very energy-heavy class. You're going to be doing a lot of spells, and you're going to always be casting spells. So the Royal Cowl is very, very key on it, unless you're going to be like face tanking things. So then you could probably put like a Scholar Cowl on, but you're putting yourself in danger. Or if your team is using Druid Cowls, you might be able to do another option on the helm. And then for the chest piece, I go Druid Robe, and I use the Obsessive Burst on the Druid Robe. So each stack of the Obsessive, so when you pop the Obsessive Burst, every time you cast a spell, any kind of spell, whether it be your boots, helm, weapon, anything, you build 1 stack, and for every stack, it increases your damage output by 7%, and this includes healing too, but healing output, not healing input. So if you were using healing staff, it would increase your healing output, but and then on the boots, I use Mage Sandal.
But it's definitely it's a shorter blink for sure.
It's 9 meters. I just looked it up. So it's 9 meters compared to 15 meters. And you're not wrong, and you're not wrong, and you're not exactly right. Like I don't want to say that it's not based off like the players like that way, but like the 9 meter blink, like cleric sandals are really good. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of cloth DPS that use the cleric sandals, but like you said, for my playstyle and our playstyles, like we play really aggressively, and we like to use our sandals. Like I'm known for blinking in, so also if I need to blink out, I'm usually pretty deep, so my blinking out, I need those extra 6 meters. You know, every inch counts, buddy. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm just joking.
Especially in GVG.
Yeah, especially in GVGs. But no, the Mage Sandals.
Young inch.
Yeah. Yo, but
Rick James.
Yeah. But yeah, the 15 meters, definitely need the 15 meters, so that you can't get caught, because like a tank will like fiend sandal swap you, and you'll be in a bad position. So you're gonna want to move your way out, and then the next thing that they'll probably do to you is a bop helm and really get you out of position. So that's like one of the main reasons those extra 6 meters matter compared to like a cleric sandal, which is a 9 meter blink. And also you can, some people really like the cleric sandals over the mage sandals, because you can like, I can't remember what the term is, but when you blink and you detract damage. So if you blink on the spot as some damage is incoming, it'll basically negate the damage. But the mage sandals is a delayed blink, so like after a second or two, it'll blink you away.
And I guess that comes with time, with people playing, and they understand when people are coming in with the damage, they can pre-blink and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd always blink and then I'd just be dead. I'm like, this sucks.
I shouldn't have blinked. Oh,
shouldn't have wore this fucking shirt.
It's funny.
So yeah, so talk about the passives that you use, because you use the passives differently, and how you stack your obsessive bursts. Because I know you use a damage passive over a speedcaster passive.
Yeah. So the staff I use, it's also the infernal staff. So for my passives, I use the aggression on each of them. So it's all about the damage output. Compared to a lot of other people like to also prefer the speed passive. So the reason I like to use the more damage one is because positionally in the GVGs, the cast speed won't come in as important, because your aggressive caster on your weapon, for every 4th spell, you get a speed buff on your weapon. So when you pop your Druid Robe, that's 1 spell, and then you pop your Helm, that's the 2nd spell. So then if you're in the back line and the tank starts running in, and so you pop your Druid Robe Obsessive and your Helm, and then you pop your Firewall to keep the tank back, your 4th spell, and you do 1 Q, you've instantly got your cast speed out. So then you can put your Infernal Staff E off on the target, and you're just teeing off, sped up, casting really fast, and the tank has to fall back, and you're getting the most value and efficiency out of your build. Now, if you're running the speed passive, you're going to be missing out on like a big percentage of damage, and so when you're missing out on a big percentage of damage, you're going to be a little bit more inefficient on the spots while you're rotating around, because in the GVGs you're looking for more of a team play. So in certain scenarios, like if you're not too comfortable with your team, or the playstyle in your team is a little bit more different, the speed passive might be actually useful. Shit! I wish you didn't fuck after recording the first time. Fuck!
No, dude. Honestly, I
I'm sweating, bud. I'm sweating over here. I'll tell you what.
I think it's good. I think it's good. I think what you said was good, though.
All right, yeah.
I'm
glad, but good.
Whenever you're talking about GVG and stuff like that, I know you mentioned earlier. This is before I messed up and didn't record. That you were talking about how you use different pots for different areas during GVG. So
okay, yeah. I'll explain yeah. All right, so for GVGs in Mercia and Cumbria, it's very important, since the IP in the zone is scaled differently. So for Mercia GVGs, there's no IP cap. So any kind of gear you wear and whatever your spec is behind it, you're going to scale to that amount. So your damage is going to be a lot more, and your HP is going to be a lot more. In Cumbria, there's a cap, but it's not as extensive. It's not as limitless as it is in Mercia. So your damage and your spec and your pots still are very important. So for Mercia and Cumbria, I would use resistance pots. But for Anglia and the Royal Zone, I would go with poison pots, because your IP cap is so low, so your damage is so much less. And the poison is a true damage, and there's resistance, and it lowers your resistance too. So it just does so much more effort, or it does so much more work than that a resistance pot in those kind of zones. Because like if you pop a resistance pot and somebody poisons you in a Royal or an Anglia GVG, you're still gonna die through that. It's actually mind-blowing. So make sure you put poison pots on if you're doing Anglia and Royal GVGs.
And we're both solid, firm believers in omelets. Omelets are the way to go for everything.
Pork omelets. Yeah, I definitely use pork omelets. Aggressive caster on the weapon, and I would go with Morgana Cape. Always go with Morgana Cape, because it gives you 2 rounds of damage. So the cool thing about the fire is there's a lot of different playstyles you can do. You'll see some fire mages that like to sit way far back, so they're using their firewall always to peel. And then there's some other fire mages where they move move forward as they're casting spells. So as they're queuing, they're kiting and they're moving forward rather than kind of kiting backwards. And then they can use their firewall to zone themselves in the corner. Me personally, I like to do both. Like some GVGs you'll see me and I'll be kind of sitting back and then I'll build up my obsessive burst, which is the Druid Robe's ability, and I'll walk my way forward. And then you could, like, once I hit, like, if I have my Morgana Cape up and before I cast my E, what the Morgana Cape does is increases your cast speed by, I think, by 50%. Let me check. Yeah, increases your cast speed and attack speed by 50%. So out of nowhere, you'll have a huge cast speed. You just turn into an auto turret and you're going to be able to pump so much damage, especially if you're 8 stacks on your obsessive robe. You're going to be doing insane amounts of damage, and that's a time that the enemy team will want to shut you down. So that's one of the main reasons I use all damage passives on my equipment, because if you play your build properly, your passives on your weapon and your helm and your weapon and your cape will carry your attack speed. Because when you're just queuing normally, it'll seem slow if you're a player that's used to using the attack speed passives on your armors. But if you time your heavy casting spells, like the cast time for E on a Infernal is a lot longer than the Q, obviously, because it's a heavier spell. So if you use the cast time of your E the same time that you hit your aggressive caster on your weapon, you're going to get that E about the same time out as a Q. And if you can get that out, you minimize the chance of you getting interrupted when that E comes off. And if your E gets interrupted, you're basically just flatlined in the back. It's kind of, your class kind of becomes useless. So that gives you an ability to where, like, you're building your stacks of your cast speed. So, like, say you've cast 2 spells so far, 3 spells so far, so then you can use your blink to, like, maneuver or aggressively, because you know you're gonna have your aggressive caster. So if you see an opening or a little window to where you can do damage, you can take advantage of it pretty quickly with the cast, with the class, if you have the damage passives on, because your damage will be a little bit higher than everybody else's, because certain other classes have to use different passives to help their builds be secure. So the fire has been refined to a place where it's a really, really strong build.
So to follow up the interview and everything like that, what are your last final words to talk to people that are, like, questioning, they want to play fire, they're like, I want to play fire, but I'm kind of worried that, like, it might be a little bit of a glass cannon and all that kind of stuff. And then, like, just what is your, like, be like, this is what it is, this is why I play fire, like, this is why you should do it, or, like, just this is your final outro, bro.
I feel like this is deja vu, like I've been here once before, but I've been waiting for this opportunity again.
I'm a fucking idiot. I did this.
No. Let's go with this. I'm ready for this. I've been waiting for this moment for me to be able to tell you why I want the fire.
I did it with the Shazar interview too.
Okay, cool. So this is my outro, everybody. Let me tell you the real reason why fire is really good. Because if you look at the fire mages out there and you compare them, there's definitely a different class level. Like, when you become obsessed with what you want to play and you learn everything about it, you'll know the timings, like how long it'll take you to build up your stacks to 8 without even having to look at the top left corner of the screen or realizing how many you can base it off the enemy's HP. So like I can see, like, if I got the tank down to like 60% HP, I know I've probably casted like 6 or 7 Qs. And if I pop my obsessive robe, I know I'm almost there to that 8 stack. And when I'm at that 8 stack, I'm about to put out that Infernal E. So when I watch other fire mages blowing their this gets me really hyped up thinking about it. You know what I mean? That, like, Cool J blowing my load.
It gets you hyped up thinking about blowing your E.
Yeah,
fucking rats.
Sometimes you gotta be careful what you say, freaking rats. So but you just gotta be careful. Like every class, like, or at least the fire class, there's just so much power between, like, the skill levels of understanding what you can do with the build. So the cast speed of it, it's just so good. The fire burning. So I need to be careful about what I say here. I don't want to make it seem like it's too good and then they're going to nerf it again, because they're on the vengeance of nerfing it. But if you look at the other fire mages, they're not doing anything. They're just trying to bring me down, LA Cool J.
No,
guys,
it's not that they're going to nerf it.
Support me.
Huh? It's not that they're going to nerf it. It's just you're so passionate about the class that you love, that you believe in it no matter what state it's in.
Yeah, I'll never let it go, Never gonna let you up. Never gonna
let you down. Never gonna turn around. And firewall's gonna hurt you.
Come into my firewall.
But yeah, so all in all, like, fire's in a really good spot, and it's not too strong, but it's not weak. It's in a good spot. Like, and like what Sohrab was saying, every class, like weapon, not class, every weapon in the game has a place in a spot. Yeah, it might be a little bit stronger in this or that. Like, for example, I mean, fire's not gonna be the best thing to go out ganking with, but I mean, you're not gonna bring claws to a GVG and be as good as fire is. So like everything has this spot in Albion, and everything is viable, and every class line is viable from ganking to PvP, like big scale, small scale to PvE. I mean, so that's what.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong. And like the sky's the limit with builds. Like, so don't let anybody ever tell you like a build's not good, because no one believed in the Infernal staff for the longest time. And then, you know, I stuck that bad boy on. I put the mage sandals on, and I put the royal cowl on, and it was like I felt like the OG Genesis over here. Like I'm just making it rain. And for example, you can look at it like people who have played one class, and everybody talked down about it. I used to run the Infernal back in the like the end of beta 3, and everybody's like, dude, that's some dog crap build. You shouldn't be using that. You don't even know what you're doing. You're trash. You know. Your wife doesn't work at the college, blah blah blah. Your wife's probably a stripper. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I don't even have a wife that's a stripper.
Dorothy Mantooth is a saint.
That's not even the point. But what I'm saying is like, look at another. There's another popular streamer as well that like uses a weapon that everybody used to think was trash, like Stabber, for example. Like no one used the dagger pair. No one thought it was good. And then out of nowhere, that guy's like killing tons of people with it. They're like, oh, the dagger pair is good.
Dude,
but like
he's in there like
anybody has
he's in
potential to do
GVZ's shot calling with daggers. I mean, nobody thought that was gonna happen. Yeah, nobody thought that was gonna happen.
So you just gotta learn the class, spend a lot of time with it, and you can make anything good if it's not a bad weapon.
All right, so cool. The one last thing. So there's been a lot of talk about this, and I talk about this a lot. Like if you have really high specs in Great Fire, I think it's one of those staffs that like nobody thinks about because, you know, it's not an artifact and it's just kind of like a whatever staff. But that Pillar of Fire, when you have the omelet on for your cooldowns, it's an 8-second E, and an 8-second E with high specs is a lot of damage. What are your thoughts on that? Because there's a lot of people that ask me about this in my stream, and I always say it's great, but we want to hear it from a fire master. So what are your thoughts on it?
I really like the Great Fire. So recently with this last patch, they nerfed the damage of the Infernal E. So I'm kind of in question to see what to use next. The Great Fire is definitely on my. It's the second weapon I'm looking at using. Like I'm gonna see in the next GVG how it goes, because they really buffed the crossbow. So the crossbow has a really long range Q, and depending on what crossbow they use, it can really hard counter the Infernal E because you have the cast time. So a good crossbow could just sit there and just abuse you to where you're not going to be doing much damage. But in a perfect world, when that crossbow is looking to do something to you, if you drop that E onto the crossbow, he's going to have to move, and he can't do damage output. And that's an AOE E, and like you said, it's an 8-second cooldown, and it's going to really put pressure on the other team. So I'm really actually looking forward to using the Great Fire in this upcoming season. I can't really say much about if it's going to work or not. I have lots of characters that are all 400 fire, so I'll be able to see the maximum potential of the weapon under a setting where it's like any mistake will cost you your life in the match. So I guess we'll just have to see if it's going to work out. Well, I know the Qs. So the Q. So on fire staffs, like the higher the relic of it, the more the Q damage is going to be because the item power is higher. So the Great Fire being a two-handed, the Q on it is still going to be a high damage Q.
But it won't be as much as a relic because it's
exactly.
So like that's what the whole question is. Everybody's like, well, exactly what you said. Like the E is on a 8-second cooldown with an omelet, and it does a lot of damage. But the Q might be less pressure because it's not as much IP because it's not an artifact. So like that's what I was talking about. Like it's kind of like up in the air. Like, is it gonna be that viable, or is it gonna be like it is, but it's not worth it because of the Q damage being a little bit lower?
I think the damage of it isn't going to be that dramatically lower, like compared to like if it, say for example, if you were to use a one-handed fire staff with over like a two-handed, it won't be that big of a jump. But I think it'll definitely be noticeable. Speaking of the Q damage, I was also thinking about, since they just buffed the mosaic, which does a damage buff now, but you have an energy, you have also a negative energy increase. So like you spend 12% more energy or something like that, for example. But that doesn't really affect the fire mage because you have the royal cal, so you have infinite energy. So I've also been dibbling and dabbling with the one-hand fire staff coming back into the meta too, because with this whole new crossbow, I think the meta is going to shift into so right now it's a double backline meta again. So I think it might shift into one crossbow and then something utility on the other side. So a one-hand fire could be useful because you could, if you land a pyro, which is the one-hand fire's E, onto the same target as a crossbow, it could really do a lot of damage, which then could potentially bring a bloodletter back into the meta because that target will definitely be under 40% HP or 40%, which a bloodletter will execute. So
oh yeah, for sure,
it's gonna be really exciting. In this next meta.
That'd be really good for Logic.
Yeah, he'll get excited. He's gonna listen to this and his mouth's gonna walk.
I know. So I see that with this meta and with all the changes he's talking about, maybe Curse is coming back out of the meta.
Yeah, so here it's this meta, they changed a lot of things. So Curse, I don't know if Curse has a spot in it anymore because Curse is like a sustained kind of thing. Like
right.
You need to build stacks on things, and that damage is going to come over time. And everything else in this meta right now, that damage is coming quickly. Like the fire is like in between a Curse and a crossbow at the moment, and that crossbow is really strong. So.
And then maybe one day we'll see Frost back in the meta. Who knows? But
yeah, actually, I think the Frost could come too, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what's going on. So, all right, guys. So that's what it is right there. Any last words before we wrap it up? I think we've covered a lot. I'm actually gonna have to make this a video on itself with all those outtakes.
I know, dude. Fuck me, Jesus Christ! Holy shit!
I can't believe that.
I'm sweating. Oh, I tell you what. After you told me the first time for the 50 minutes, I started sweating, and then I couldn't stop laughing. Then I started sweating more, and then I forgot everything I said. Then I started sweating again. I was like, oh shit,
dude. The whole time I was trying to tell Sohrab that I wasn't recording, and all he kept yelling on the Mac was, "Don't nerf fire! Don't nerf fire! Don't nerf fire!" And I was like, "I'm not recording." He's like, "What?"
Oh no!
It was nuts.
Oh no!
But yeah, this has been a really fun interview, and hopefully everybody out there is watching. You get an idea of, like, you see a fire staff, you're like, oh, it's just fire, but there's so much that goes into it. And then especially when you take a weapon like this and you put it into a high scale environment, like a high scale GVG PvP environment, it even has even more. So like GVGs look easy, and everybody's like, oh, I can GVG. But when you get in there and you start doing it, there is so much that you have to like pay attention to. You're like, oh, I'm such a good this class, and you get in GVG and you're just getting one shot, and you're like, but why do you get one shot? Because there's so much that you have to pay attention to. Like, you need to know what everybody's doing at all times and not just yourself. And I know that sounds like, oh, of course, but when you're in there, like, you need to know, like, oh, this tank has this many, and this guy has this many stacks, and this guy's, I bet you, and his cooldown's gonna come off in just a second. He's gonna come in there and try to bear pause and this and that and that. And if you're not thinking these things ahead of time, you're fudged, bro. They're gonna come in there, they're gonna melt you, you're gonna lose yourself and look like a fucking fool. So
yeah, you need to know everybody's ability. You need to know what their abilities do, what the kill target is, what potentially could kill you. Like I kind of dabbled on this earlier about like the class levels between like a certain class, like certain fire mages. So like if you were to compare me to another fire mage, like do they know that a mace's snare is the same cooldown as a fire? So if I block one mace's snare with my firewall, by the time my firewall comes up again, I know they have their snare up. So if I see them rotating towards me or positioning, or if I bait his snare by clumping with my people, I know he's going to root me. So I'm ready to firewall. Like those are things that like certain fire mages would never know. And if they listen to this, like, oh, I didn't know that. That's actually makes sense, because a lot of people like see my stream, they're like,
cooldowns.
Yeah, they're like, oh, he's so good at firewalling. I'm like, well, if I block the first one with the firewall, I know when the next one's going to be coming up, because my firewall just came off its cooldown too. So I know potentially in the next 5 or 6 seconds it's going to happen as well. And same thing, like if somebody pops a night helm that can go through the firewall, like, you know that danger is going to be in that little time frame that they have to make something happen. And if they don't, there's a X amount cooldown that they have until that next night helm comes up. So you can pressure forward and use your firewall to create space for yourself to do damage.
Alrighty guys, thank you all so much for watching this. If you want to see more of these, let me know. I have a pretty good relationship with a lot of people in Albion, and I can do more interviews and stuff like this if you want to know. So you want to see somebody that you think should have an interview, or it's a player, they don't have to be a GVG, they can be anybody in the game. Let me know, and I'll contact them and see if we can put it together. As always, boys, thank y'all so much for this. It's been a super fun opportunity, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Love y'all so much, boys. Peace.